Let's not mince words. AVP Requiem, released in 2007, is the kind of cinematic experience that makes you question the very purpose of movies. In fact, calling it a film feels generous. It's more like watching a PowerPoint presentation during a power blackout. If you ever wondered what it's like to watch a movie through a thick fog, then congratulations, your wish has been granted. This 2007 catastrophe is what happens when Hollywood decides to milk two beloved franchises for all they're worth. Then, apparently, spends the budget on discount CGI and leftover catering. Set in Gunnison, Colorado, a town so dreary you'd think the aliens chose it as a retirement spot, AVP Requiem is a TED talk in how not to make a movie. From its abysmal lighting to its laughably poor effects, this film redefines the term disaster piece. So who's responsible for this mess? The Strauss brothers, Greg and Colin, who seem to have a particular disdain for their audience's ability to see what's happening on screen, are the masterminds behind this dimly lit disaster. These two had a background in visual effects, having worked on films like 300 and Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. However, when left to their own devices, they somehow managed to forget everything they knew about making things look good. It's as if they thought the audience wouldn't notice the film's flaws if they simply kept everything in the dark. And boy, is this film dark. It's nearly as dark as my soul. Now let's spread the accountability around, shall we? The practical effects were handled by none other than Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis, who are well-known names in the world of creature design and practical effects. They're veterans of the industry, having worked on the original Alien films and many other iconic projects. It's baffling, then, that the creature effects in AVP Requiem feel like such a colossal step down from their previous work. I'd also like to say in their defence, some of the behind-the-scenes creature effects actually look okay, and I did like the Predator's design of being a battle-scarred tough guy with some mandibles missing, when you can see it. So whether it was budget constraints, lack of creative direction, or just an off day at the office, something clearly went wrong here. The film's cinematography was handled by Daniel Pearl, a name you might recognise from his work on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's not bright enough. What the It's not bright enough.
Pearl is no stranger to creating atmospheric tension through lighting and composition, so it's particularly disappointing that AVP Requiem looks like it was shot in a cellar during a power cut. The murky visuals and incoherent action sequences are a far cry from what someone of his calibre should be delivering. Lastly, let's not forget the editing by Dan Zimmerman, who has worked on big-budget films like X-Men The Last Stand. In AVP Requiem, the editing is so choppy and disjointed that it feels like we're trying to hide the film's shortcomings by cutting away before the audience could fully register just how bad everything looked. It's a tactic that doesn't work. If anything, it makes the film's flaws even more glaring. So while the Strauss brothers are at the helm of this cinematic shipwreck, let's not let the rest of the crew off the hook. There's plenty of blame to go around in this production, and all of these experienced professionals somehow came together to create a film that's almost impossible to watch. If the visuals weren't bad enough, the score and sound design are here to remind you that mediocrity truly knows no bounds. Brian Tyler's score is the auditory equivalent of elevator music, inoffensive, forgettable, and completely unworthy of the material it's supposed to elevate. It's the kind of soundtrack you'd expect to find in a knockoff video game, not in a film that's supposed to showcase an epic clash between two legendary sci-fi monsters. The sound design is a cacophony of shrieks, roars and explosions, all cranked up to the max, presumably in the hope that sheer volume will distract you from the lack of any real tension or excitement. Much like being trapped in a washing machine with a dozen metal spoons, loud, chaotic and utterly pointless. The constant barrage of noise does little more than wear down your patience and leave you yearning for the sweet relief of silence. The plot of AVP Requiem is about as coherent as a drunk uncle at a wedding trying to give a speech. The film kicks off with a Predalien, a predator-xenomorph hybrid, because apparently they thought mixing two great things would make something even better. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. So, the Predalien crash lands in a forest near Gunnison. What follows is a series of poorly lit skirmishes that are so hard to follow you'll start to wonder if your television is actually plugged in. The Predalien, now our main antagonist, embarks on a spree of carnage, conveniently spawning a horde of xenomorphs along the way. There seems to be loads of the facehuggers about as well. This film tries to explain this by introducing the ludicrous concept that the Predalien can now lay eggs directly into human hosts, bypassing the need for facehuggers, but he doesn't really do this till the final act. There's a particularly revolting scene in a hospital where the Predalien goes on a rampage, implanting embryos into pregnant women, a sequence so tasteless And idiotic, it could only have been concocted by someone who thought subtlety was a brand of shampoo. But wait, it does get worse. The military response to this alien invasion is laughable at best. We're supposed to believe that a small town sheriff, a handful of soldiers, and a group of civilians are the only line of defence against an intergalactic infestation.
What the fuck are you?
Eventually, the government decides the best course of action is to nuke the entire town, a decision that's treated with all the gravitas of ordering a pizza.
God help us all.
The Predator, who's supposedly on a clean-up mission, brings along an array of high-tech gadgets, including a new whip that's introduced with great fanfare, but barely gets any use. It's a weapon that could have been a highlight. But in true AVP Requiem fashion, it's kept so poorly lit that you'll be lucky to catch more than a flicker of it. The film's treatment of the Predator homeworld is equally frustrating. We get a tantalisingly brief look at it before being whisked away to the dreariest town in America. It's as if the filmmakers wanted to tease us with something interesting, but then remembered they had no idea how to execute it. The cast of AVP Requiem is a gathering of actors who look like they showed up for the wrong audition and decided to stick around out of sheer confusion. Leading the charge is Stephen Pasquale as Dallas Howard, the local bad boy who reluctantly steps up as the hero. Pasquale tries his best to breathe life into his character, but he's working with dialogue so wooden it could double as a garden shed. Rachel Ellsworth plays Kelly O'Brien, an army pilot who's just returned home to her young daughter Molly, Ariel Gade. Kelly's character is meant to add a touch of military grit and maternal concern, but she's so underdeveloped you'll forget she's even in the film, until she's suddenly thrust into a poorly lit action scene. Molly exists solely to be a child in peril, a trope so overused it's practically an industry standard. But here it's done with all the emotional resonance of a paper cut. Johnny Lewis plays Ricky Howard, Dallas's younger brother, who is embroiled in a painfully underwhelming teen romance subplot with Jessie, Kristen Hager. Their interactions are so devoid of chemistry that you'll start to wonder if they were filmed separately and spliced together in post-production. Sheriff Morales, played by John Ortiz, is the town's lawman who spends most of the film reacting to the chaos around him, with the same level of enthusiasm you'd expect from someone forced to attend a particularly dull insurance seminar.
I hope we're both wrong.
If you're looking for deep themes or meaningful commentary, you'd be better off watching Paint Dry. The film flirts with the idea of survival both on a personal and species level, but it handles these themes with all the grace of a hippo on roller skates. The fight for survival narrative is undermined by the sheer stupidity of the characters' decisions, and any attempt at social commentary, such as the military's bungled response, falls flatter than a pancake. The Predonians' ability to lay eggs directly into host is presumably meant to add a new layer of horror, but it's so absurd and poorly executed that it ends up being more laughable than terrifying. Instead of exploring the implications of this new breeding method, the film opts for cheap gore and shock value, leaving any potential buried under layers of ineptitude. To the surprise of absolutely no one, AVP Requiem was panned by critics faster than you can say what a load of tosh. The film was slammed for its incoherent plot, abysmal lighting, and terrible CGI. It limped to the box office, barely making back its budget, though that's more a testament to the misguided loyalty and endurance to sit through the cinematic hell of the Alien and Predator fans than to the film's quality. Audience reactions were just as dismal, with most viewers leaving the cinema feeling like they'd been robbed. The film didn't win any awards, unless you count the collective disdain of the film community as some sort of twisted recognition. Its legacy is that of a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you try to cash in on beloved franchises without putting in the effort to create something remotely watchable. If Requiem has any influence, it's that it effectively killed the Alien vs Predator crossover franchise. There have been no direct sequels, no spin-offs, and no clamouring for more. In fact, Dismal Plus has just taken it out of canon. It's a cinematic dead end, a film so devoid of merit that it seems to have sucked the life out of any future prospects for these two iconic creatures to share the screen again. The film's treatment of the Predator homeworld, which could have been a springboard for new stories and exciting lore, is squandered and quickly forgotten. Instead, the film retreats back to the tired formula of humans caught in the middle of an interspecies smackdown, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. Any chance of expanding the universe, building on the mythos, or even just delivering a decent creature feature is buried under the weight of its own incompetence. The only real legacy Requiem leaves behind is as a cautionary tale for filmmakers everywhere. Just because you can make a movie doesn't mean you should. Now, if there's one thing Requiem does even remotely well, it's the Predator's gear. I am a bit of a gear porn person. I absolutely love gear porn. Though calling it a saving grace is like calling a pebble a mountain. The Predator's arsenal of high-tech weapons is the one element of the film that seems to have received any real attention to detail. From the iconic plasma cannon to the sleek, deadly wrist blades, the gear is designed with a kind of care that makes you wish the rest of the film had followed suit. One of the new toys introduced is the Predator's whip, a weapon so cool in concept that it's a crying shame we barely get to see it in action. The whip could have been a standout feature, but true to form, the film manages to squander its potential by keeping it hidden in the dark like a secret the filmmakers were ashamed of. It's as if they wanted to tease us with something interesting but then remembered they didn't know how to shoot it properly. Even the brief glimpse of the Predator homeworld, which could have offered a fresh perspective and rich new lore, is reduced to a blink and you'll miss it moment. It's as if the filmmakers were afraid of showing too much, either because they didn't want to blow the budget, or because they knew they couldn't do it justice. The gear is the lone shiny gem in this pile of rubbish, but it's not enough to salvage the film. It's like being handed a beautifully crafted sword only to find out it's made of plastic. It looks good for a second, but the more you think about it, the more disappointed you become. In the end, AVP Requiem is a cinematic nightmare that's best left in the dark, both literally and figuratively. It's a film that takes the worst elements of both Alien and Predator and somehow makes them even worse. The plot is a tangled mess of illogical developments and nonsensical character decisions. The cast is forgettable at best, and the effects are so poorly executed they make the original Alien look like it was made yesterday. And I say that with love, as that film's now 45 years old, and everything in it looks better than this movie. The film's only redeeming feature, the Predator's gear, isn't nearly enough to make up for the overwhelming flaws. The CGI is a disaster, the lighting is so bad you'll wonder if someone forgot to pay the electric bill, and the sound design is a relentless assault on your eardrums. So here's the real takeaway. Save yourself the trouble and skip this one. There are plenty of other films out there that are worth your time, ones that will entertain, thrill, and maybe even scare you. AVP Requiem isn't one of them. Now, if you've made it through this critique, and a movie that's as dark as my soul, you deserve a medal for bravery. But why subject yourself to such cinematic darkness when there's a whole universe of geek culture that's actually worth exploring? At Geeklectica, I'm dedicated to diving into the best and worst of sci-fi, fantasy, and all things geeky. So if you're tired of stumbling through the dark, both in movies and in life, why not join me? Together we'll navigate the vast expanse of geekdom, shining a light on the gems and calling out the duds. Subscribe, like, and comment below to keep the conversation going. And let's make sure that the only darkness we experience is the thrill of the unknown, not the muddled mess of bad filmmaking.